Welcome, everyone, to today's program, part of the COVID-19 and Main Street webinar series, Leading Through Crisis. Today we have with us Norma Ramirez de Miess. She is Senior Program Officer and Director of Leadership Development at the National Main Street Center. Quickly here, before we begin the program, we want to make sure that all of our participants understand how to use our webinar platform. So right before we get started here, we'll just show you a little bit of how to use GoToWebinar. If you are using your computer audio or phone audio, you are automatically muted. You may use either telephone or computer audio. You may control your choice under the audio section of your control panel. We welcome you to submit your questions at any time using the question function on your control panel. And if we're unable to address your question during today's program, we encourage you to email us at mainstreet@savingplaces.org. We're going to, take your questions at any time. We will address questions towards the end of the program and leave extra time at the end. If you're unable to stay with us through the question and answer period, that will always be recorded as well, but we do want to leave some extra time just for, taking into account everybody's specific questions. We do have a capacity audience today. If you're unable to stay on through the entire program, we want to make sure that we share this information with you and others. So please make sure that you come back to find the recordings in the COVID-19 resource page of Main Street America about 24 hours from now. That will be posted. Also, I want to note, typically we like to put our slides in the handout section of your control panel. We're having a little bit of an issue with posting those there, so I'm going to send you right now to the entire audience via the chat function a link to access the slides. Please click that link. That should open a web link with a PDF. So please make sure to download those, grab them now, and you can come back and reference them later. Really, Norma, though, would like to focus your attention on the screens rather than on the printout of the slides. So just keep in mind that that's there for you. As I mentioned, this is a capacity webinar. We aren't able to accept additional registrants. So I've received a couple of messages about people trying to log on. If people weren't able to register in advance, they will be able to come back and review the recording of this. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Norma Ramirez de Miess, who is our Director of Leadership Development, as I mentioned, and has put together a program for you to really think through your role as a Main Street leader in this crisis. Norma, well, thank you for being here today. And once again, this is just a review of our control panel. If you have any questions, feel free to chat. I'll be answering questions throughout the program so I can help with your technical issues as well. But Norma, take it away.
Thank you, Kelly. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I am excited to talk about how we can lead not just during, but after this crisis. I'm excited about highlighting much of what you have done, and in many ways, although perhaps not through the pictures or through the references, you're going to see, hopefully, that many of the things that I am going to mention reflect your ongoing efforts. And I just wanted to highlight the Center for COVID-19 resources that we have at Main Street America. If you go to our website, mainstreet.org/COVID-19 resources, we have put together and continually to update a really good, a really great and comprehensive set of resources there, from information about what's out there at the national level to also information on potential tools and resources you can use at the local level. Hopefully all of you have been participating and enjoying this information and are able to share it with those in your district and in your communities. Like this banner says, we're in this together. We believe that firmly because it is about what we do. Main Street has been working on community revitalization for over 40 years. And so, of course, the crisis that we've gone through for the last 4 decades don't always compare to each other, depending on the place that we're in. Sometimes we feel them very strongly. Sometimes it's just news on somebody else's land. But today, COVID-19 is really hitting everybody, and it is impacting our districts and our communities. So this is an opportunity to come together under certain circumstances and seeing how we can go beyond just surviving, but to be able to succeed in these efforts and be proud in the future to see how much we've learned from this experience. So with that in mind, I wanted to highlight again that for those of you familiar to Main Street, you know that we are a proven strategy for a comprehensive strategy for revitalization of historic commercial districts and downtowns across the country. And so revitalizing is not new to us. We've done it for, like I said, over 4 decades. Many of you probably have been with us from the beginning. Many of you probably have started your efforts in just a few years past. But as you see Main Street, I wanted to highlight that we actually take a look at this crisis also comprehensively. We want to keep that in mind. The Main Street approach is your tool, not only from a day-to-day, but also during crisis. And I'll explain how to take a look at this framework and use it and leverage it for the benefit of your efforts as well. With that in mind, many of you have heard I am what I call myself a student of leadership. I have great admiration for the community leaders and the Main Street directors and their staff. I'm proud to visit and witness the local revitalization efforts in communities across the country. And much learning has gone through about how people lead, about their efforts in taking a look at a comprehensive approach, but also being mindful of the leadership role that we each have. So with that, I wanted to share with you what I call our multifaceted roles as Main Street directors or as leaders of revitalization and in our communities. Many of you, again, have heard me say that this job, and you have experienced it probably yourself, it's about doing. It's about taking action. And we do a lot of that. And in the past, I talked that in many ways, we do too much of that and not enough of the other two roles that I'm going to mention. However, executing is an important part of our role because it is an opportunity to lead by example, to build teams by us being part of the group. And whether it's guiding or encouraging or promoting or explaining or doing with people, we get a lot out of taking action in Main Street in any and every one of the 4 points. When we look at managing, that is an important role and in Main Street, and we want our leaders to consider that we're not here to just do. And by doing, I mean taking on an event or a project and managing the project or event or making it happen at a certain level. But we're here to also take a look at developing leadership. And leadership involves managing and managing effectively. Managing is about establishing the systems or the environment by which we can succeed. Without those systems, without processes, without the structure in place, we struggle. Confusion is sometimes what volunteers see between what's my role, what am I supposed to do? If things are not clearly outlined or defined, sometimes we struggle. And part of that is about taking the role of managing the time, the resources, the efforts that people provide, and the resources we gather so that we can then execute them appropriately and effectively. When we think of our leadership, we also think of actual leading. And by leading means not just being in front of the group. That's actually beyond that. Leading actually means influencing to the point that we actually get to motivate people and inspire them to act and to action. So a leader influences action. A manager provides the environment by what people can take action and be successful and be proud of being accountable and supportive of the overall efforts. And by executing, we all get things done. So keep in mind these three multifaceted roles that many of you have heard me say. If you haven't before, I believe they are crucial in also leading this crisis and getting through the crisis with success. Throughout this presentation, we'll get more into why and how we can do both a balancing act in looking at the recovery, the next steps, the revitalization efforts overall, and do them comprehensively, but also ensure that our leadership is in the place that can be making the most impact. When we talk about leadership, we are familiar with leading revitalization at a pace that we can also be not only proud but sustain from year to year. But when it's through crisis, our leadership and our roles between managing, executing, and leading take an important perhaps journey. When we look at the different phases of crisis, and you have a lot of concepts out there that promote different stages or phases of crisis. I'm taking the liberty of highlighting some that I believe, in simple terms, can guide us into what and how we can lead through crisis. First of all, is that stage or that phase that we go through when it's about taking action, that it's urgent. We were thrown into something that we perhaps were a little prepared for, not prepared at all, or perhaps we've been preparing throughout the years and we're responding accordingly. But immediate response is the phase that it's basically calling for action and it's urgent. We have to make it happen right away. When we look at the crisis, the next step or the next phase will be managing impact. And it's an opportunity to get to build some stabilization. And as you can see, this circle is within the next circle and within the next circle, because in my opinion, these phases are not separated from each other. In some ways, depending on how prepared we are, and that's one of the theories out there, that the opportunities to prepare for a crisis and plan for a crisis are so crucial and important. Unfortunately, many of us are not fully prepared or not prepared at all, because we go through our efforts from one day to the next, from 1 year to the next, without anticipating that perhaps there could be a crisis in the future. We're very positive people, and that's a good thing to keep, and that's an important thing to maintain through crisis. But it is also important to do some forecasts based on experiences, perhaps. In some parts of our country, we can say that sometimes natural disasters between winters or between different natural disasters, whether it's floods, etc., have been hard in different parts of the country. But it is important to consider that if we are prepared, then we might be able to handle them better. However, the COVID-19 is a crisis like no other. And that's an opportunity to understand if we don't feel prepared, it's because there was no way to be prepared about it fully and perfectly. We're going to go through the different phases the best way we can. And I want to recognize that many of you, and I would like to say all of you, are probably doing that just the best you can. And so in these efforts, we want to keep that in mind. And then as we move forward from one phase to the other, from taking one step and then another, we are going to find ourselves in the phase that I call leading recovery, which is, in my own translation, what we do in Main Street, revitalization, bringing back vitality to our districts and to our communities. And of course, under these circumstances, it's going to be about recovery, about recovering of our strengths in the economic base, about recovering of our resources, about recovering of our hope. And I'm hoping that's an important piece that we want to work on as well. When we look at the opportunities to say the calendar, and throughout the last few weeks, we've been participating, and by we, I mean the National Main Street Center staff has been participating in calls with coordinating programs and with communities across the country. And we will continue to do that. So if you would like us to participate with your state or your citywide program or your efforts, please let us know. We will be happy to see and do as much as we can. When we look at the calendar, however, I get the questions of when is this going to end? When can I move to the next step and to the next stage? I'm getting overwhelmed. I feel like this is just too much. And you're not alone. This is definitely something that is, again, impacting all of us. But what we're hoping to do today is to drive and to lift our heads, if we can, beyond the urgency that many of us are still feeling. Many of us don't know the level of impact, the magnitude of the impact, and we don't know and don't have certainty on when is the time when we can say, okay, all of this is behind us. But certainly, we can do something about it. We can start taking the steps with the right attitude and the support needed to look beyond the urgency and start in building a sense of movement and moving forward to the next step. When we look at the immediate response that demanded urgent action from all of us, some of you were very good at looking at the news perhaps and sensing something was coming. Some of you or some of us took a little bit longer to recognize that something was building. And then pretty soon we found ourselves with some mandates and some recommendations that were specific to our communities. It's easy to say that we go through crisis when it's somebody else's crisis. But this is really an experience that all of us are going through. So in many ways, we are still going through the immediate response. But what I see out there is that many of you are already taking the steps necessary to start managing the impact. In fact, some of you, in many ways, were so strategic that your urgent or immediate response also included very important pieces of managing the impact to stabilize the environment, to make sure that the businesses felt that there was a support system, that the community felt that there was activity, and so forth. What we want is to be able to recognize, okay, are we at the point that we can move forward into building some opportunities to feel that there is a balance between what we need to respond right now and what we can be prepared for in the future. I suggest that we need to not only continue to respond to and track and support the impact that you are seeing in your communities, but also start getting ready and starting the conversations, if you haven't yet, to look at how do we manage Each of these phases required a level of assessment. The immediate response is usually about the immediate assessment. Something is wrong, I need to respond to that. The businesses are closing, I need to follow up and get more information. I need to figure out how to get the communities to continue to support, how to get the businesses to go online, how to really adapt to the action that is needed because it's an urgency. But now it's about how can we build something for a little bit longer term, understanding that, again, we don't have control on many of these elements of the crisis. We can indeed start looking at how do we manage. And again, using the Main Street approach, we're going to talk about a lot about that as well. And then finally is the opportunity to see if we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And when that is possible for us, whether you're seeing more and more how things are turning in your districts, and it's giving you a very good sense that you can not only manage the impact but start planning for the longer term. And by longer term, I don't mean 5 years. I don't mean even 3 years. This is something that we need to be very attentive that it's a moving target. It is going to be fluid, not only for the next few weeks, but also considering the next few months. So leading recovery will probably look at not only the next few months, but perhaps throughout the next few months, throughout the end of the year. And then perhaps if you're able, looking at 2021 and anticipating how you can take it on and plan with some level of stability as well. Again, a lot of this is going to start making sense on what phase we're in, what steps can we take to get into the next phase as we evolve from this journey in our communities. But when we look at the whole crisis management concept, we want to recommend the approach that has been working for us for, again, so many years. That when we look at recovery or when we look at impact, we cannot just put our face into one section. We know that at this time, economic vitality, anything that relates to the impact the businesses are feeling, the impact the district is having on the economy, is crucial. But everything else will also be impacted. The aspects of promotion, the organizational aspects of our efforts, and even the design-related aspects. So let's keep that comprehensive focus in mind as we go through. Some things might take a lead, but it does not mean that we need to leave something behind. It might need for us to plant the seeds at some of these points while we concentrate on economic vitality, while we use promotion to support economic vitality, while we look at design to support economic vitality, and so forth, while we look at everything to support how do we keep the organization going. So with that in mind, I wanted to take a little bit of time to look at this first phase. And again, many of you are probably already looking at the next phase and feeling like you're ready for that. And so I want to be mindful that, considering your pace, what we're looking at is about using the Main Street approach as your tool. And when we say the Main Street approach, we know that some areas are demanding a stronger focus at this time. So, for example, economic vitality, promotion, and organization, we know have been greatly impacted by COVID-19. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. While I don't frame design in this area, in other instances of crisis like floods or earthquakes, we know that design gets impacted. Fortunately for us, that is not the case at this time, or it will be a terrible complete picture. We know that there are areas across the country or perhaps in the world. I know that working in other countries, they might see the need to also be proactive in the areas of design, depending on the different levels of impact. But for us right now, it's about looking at economic vitality, not as a committee. Any of these points, take your focus out of committees, but using the Main Street approach as a framework. The economic vitality is about working with and supporting the existing economic base. And by that means, who we have at this time, those small business owners that are definitely putting their face and are at the forefront of the impact. And Main Street is all about small businesses. And this is what drives our economy. So, of course, we're all going to feel it. And we want to place a strong emphasis in supporting them and working with them as well. When we think of economic vitality, we also want to work with partners to assemble the necessary resources. And that means the cities, the counties, our state governments, and of course, our federal government and the agencies that are involved in supporting recovery as well. When we look at economic vitality, it's going to be an area in the 4-point approach that will require our focus and our dedicated and strategic efforts. In the past, unfortunately for many, we were not necessarily as clear what were we supposed to be doing with economic vitality. If the businesses were having success and were having great sales, or sometimes they didn't feel that they needed much of a Main Street. Sometimes these businesses recognized early on the Main Street programs have been a strong support system for them. We are, in fact, in many ways, the best support system that businesses can have in districts across the country. Why? Because supporting and strengthening the economy is one of our biggest elements of our missions. And by doing that, we are directly and indirectly impacting the success of every business in our district. However, the level of attention that we go and provide depends on how many opportunities we have to work together on items that are needed beyond just the promotional aspects of a business, the marketing aspects of a business, but more on what does a business need to succeed. Retention, is it ready for expansion? Is it possible to work with property owners to help the businesses expand and grow? Is it possible to work with property owners to look at recruitment? I would say that at this time it's about retention. It is about recovering. It's about taking a look and seeing if that closing of a business could be as temporary as it comes and not permanent. So this is the opportunity that we have to really look at what was our immediate response when the crisis hit. What have we been doing to respond, to take action? And then further, what is the opportunity that we have to stabilize or to help with partners bring some balance to the equation so that as the businesses go and struggle to keep the doors open, we can also provide some resources or build or assemble resources to continue to help them survive and hopefully in the future thrive again. When we look at our efforts, we need to make sure that not only are we communicating with the businesses one-on-one, and we appreciate that many of you are doing just that, are doing a lot of follow-ups, making sure the businesses know that you're there, that you are looking for resources for them, that you're trying to understand these resources with them. And then consequently build those partnerships that are so needed. Sometimes we work in our communities with several organizations doing similar things. This is the time to bring us all together if we haven't, and then talk about how each of our missions with our distinctive roles can then find the common themes, the common vision of support for these businesses, for these efforts in your districts and in your communities, and then assemble the necessary responses to support, whether it's resources as financial incentives, guidance on how to become more familiar with online sales, for example, or how to keep up with or understand how to do forecasts for their inventory, for their business overall. This is the opportunity we have to combine efforts and look at not only the opportunity to work with the businesses, but then for Main Street, in many ways, the opportunity is also to promote beyond the doors of these businesses, to promote online. What we find ourselves across the country is the realization, and I think it's not a surprise. We knew this. We just, in some ways, approach it differently depending on our communities and the willingness of businesses to become more in charge of expanding their visibility and the reach of their products and services, to do it not only on site, but also through the online and digital opportunities. Now this kind of forced us to do that. And so through the area of promotion, we definitely had to cancel and postpone some community activities because of the circumstances. But many of us took, and many of you, I'm so proud, that took the opportunities to create, build, or enhance or promote your promotions and activities that support the businesses. And then many of you also took the opportunity to support the image of your district, of your businesses, of your community. And that is important and it's crucial, not only for your district, for your organization, for the community in general, for every family that is indoors and wants to know that they're not isolated, that they are part of a bigger community. And the opportunities that many of you have opened up to connect the residents to the businesses, to connect the businesses with the residents through creative thinking, is amazing. And we thank you for that. We thank the leaders and the businesses that are thinking outside the box, from products that make fun of the opportunity to say we can have a good time even in hard times. We can definitely take the support local to the next level and make it fun as well. And we look at the activities that many of you are promoting and the ways that you are creatively making those activities that were perhaps planned, make them happen online, and helping people see that they still have an opportunity to look at the district as a center of activity for our community as well. And we thank you for everything that you're doing. So economic vitality benefits from promotional activities that are supporting as directly as they can the business environment, the economy. And we encourage you to continue to do that, to look at those opportunities. When we look at organization, then is not isolated from the businesses, is not isolated from the promotional aspects. I am so impressed with organizations that I know are struggling, not knowing if their funding will stay as it is or decrease, but are still very proactive at responding to the businesses and the community. I'm hoping the businesses see this, that with that support system you have in your Main Street program, it's that type of environment that you want to keep, and that we then go and think of this together. I need to keep the businesses open as much as we can, right? Well, we also need to keep the Main Street programs open. and functioning, because they are a tremendous support system. In many ways, the most direct connection to the businesses that city leaders or counties or states can consider as well. So in many ways, states and the stimulus package is considering supporting the businesses. In my opinion, and as I have shared with many of you, there's no better instrument to support and administer those funding opportunities that are being considered that through the Main Street programs across the country. And we're hoping that you are proactive at seeing the link and the connection. It is part of that system of support to have a Main Street program in your communities, because through Main Street, the businesses are directly supported. Through the businesses, that the Main Streets can also be directly supported. But we know these times are hard at this time through this crisis. So everybody needs some help, and we need to consider the opportunities. We salute those of you who have seen beyond the difficulties we're finding ourselves internally to really inspire others to be there to support not only your organizations, your district, but also those that are definitely helping us get through this crisis and putting their physical presence and their beings in danger, because they are there to help us. We appreciate those responders. We appreciate everybody that we have in our community that is supporting with this crisis. And we also appreciate the community support to Main Street organizations to keep them going and to keep them being the instrument that our districts need to come back and revitalize the district as we were doing, and perhaps even better. When we look at these 3 points, sometimes we think the design has not really an active role. I really appreciate the great examples of Main Street programs out there that are highlighting to the community that they can still see the physical elements and enjoy that part and that environment as well. Whether it's through signs that inspire and make our district look, again, motivating, inspiring. I have been inspired just by looking at all these signs that people are putting across the country in their windows, motivating, encouraging us to see the positives. I also see many of your programs highlighting coloring books or lighting up the districts, as far as, making sure that we continue to say we're alive. And this is going to be, again, the place where we can all enjoy. So the sign does not need to be less active. It probably is not going to be as strong of a focus when we think of building rehabilitation, et cetera, for example, for the next few months. But many of you are actually turning the facade improvement grants and expanding their content into making them tools that the businesses can use right now. So we appreciate what you're doing, and hopefully many of us will feel inspired to do it in more communities as well. If you have a tool that in the past has been used for physical improvements, take a look and evaluate and review the opportunities to use that incentive or that resource for economic improvements that might not be immediately needing the building improvements at this time, but more the economic improvements, the business that it needs to be in that space. For example, the sense of place, the life, and opportunities like tours provide are encouraging, just so that, again, when we think of opportunities, people can see that they can take a ride and go through the district and be inspired by everything that you're doing. When we look at the phases, we know that leading recovery is not going to be leading revitalization as usual. It's not going to be business as usual. And we're hoping this is a tremendous opportunity that can be used to do things differently, to do things better. So when we think of the last few years and how much we've been promoting the emphasis on transformation strategies as strategies or direction that can be strategic to transform, revitalize, or bring and grow vitality to our districts. Some people have asked, well, is this out the window? Because now we have to focus on the basics. We always need to be mindful of how much and how strong of a foundation we have. And then from that foundation, make sure that we can build on strategically the direction that we want to guide the future. Now that we see the district in the conditions that it is through this crisis, now that we see the opportunities that this has opened up, we want you to know that the need for strategy is as important as ever. Now, having said that, many of us that have gone through the last couple of years going through the market research, understanding what are the existing conditions, and recommending based on community input as well, recommending some specific strategies, we know that then in the near future, we're going to, when we are ready to really look at the planning for leading the recovery, that we need to be mindful that market information has changed. And so it's going to be very important that in the managing the impact phase, we also prepare ourselves with the necessary tracking, if possible, of where our district is or has been left under this crisis. And then ensure that we can reach the community's input so that they can guide us. More than ever, people will likely be motivated to tell us what they would like to see and how they would like to support that business or another business coming back as well to your district. So it's going to be crucial that we are guided through strategies, understanding that we are going to need to go and keep in mind and very active that communication and that connection with the community so they can guide us on how do they see the district, what do they see in the future, and then being mindful of the market changes that have been as a result of this crisis. When we look at that, we're going to be able to compare where we were before, where we are now, but where we want to be in the future. And that is important to say. There were some things we started to do that were more based on routine than on strategy. There were some efforts that we kept focusing more instead of actually the ones that need to be more important. And hopefully that's one of the opportunities we have through these efforts. Overall, what we want is to be able to say that through the 4-point approach, aligning to a strategy, we can define how economic vitality will come back and will be part of our efforts, stronger than ever. When we look at design, when we look at the physical appearance and elements of downtown of our districts, we're going to see that opportunity, not only today, but continually throughout the future, to foster that sense of place, the authenticity, the fabric, the importance of our historic character, but also the opportunities to guide, as progress permits, the chance to bring people back to the district as well. And that's where we see that community activity is giving us an expanded concept under this crisis. That community activity is not just about an event that we can do on the weekend or on the season. It is about the opportunity to keep the district and position the district as the heart of the community, even if people are in their homes, even if people are online. And that's what this is doing for us, to take a look at expanding our vision for promotion as well. And when we think of our organization, perhaps this is going to be a tremendous opportunity to look at how much of a sense of ownership the community has in their Main Street program. I am so proud to see communities that reaffirm their support to their Main Street programs because they know they are a strong partner to have, that they're going to do their role, they're going to take an active role in supporting the district. And I am saddened when I see Main Street leaders or community leaders that are yet to understand the value, the great value of their Main Street organizations. We invite you to have those conversations with your Main Street program. If you are a city or county or state leaders, we invite you to support Main Street across the country because they are a strong instrument in the solution and the recovery of our districts across the country. When we look at leading recovery, we need to keep in mind that perhaps silos was not how we need to look at the 4-point approach. And therefore, our organizational structure will need to be formatted in a way that can bring people together under common themes and common priorities. So, for example, economic vitality is about strengthening the economic base of our districts. And by doing that, we have to look at working with and supporting our existing businesses, but also working with our property owners. Sometimes our property owners are too absent in our meetings, in our structure. And we then realize, oh, this crisis is here and we don't have contact with the property owners. In the future, we need to increase that because that is how the equation can be complete and balanced. And in working with our partners, with the city and the county and the foundations and the corporations in your community as well. And you see how design and economic vitality can really increase their focus on successful economy, successful in developing that economy, in making sure the space is strategically used, but in making sure that retention is the biggest tool we have in the next few months and in the next few years. Sometimes we jump at recruitment when we need to start paying attention, and this crisis certainly calls for that, to retention and to supporting business more than ever before. When we look at these efforts, we're going to find ourselves with much of a ground that allows common themes to work on. Rather than working on projects, consider the opportunities to work on common priorities under each of the 4 points so that we can avoid silos, so that we can all be more connected than ever before. When we look at promotion, we look at the opportunities to then see in the future what activity is going to look like in your district. And to be mindful that we cannot just, again, as I mentioned before, focus on activity as meaning traffic on the street. Certainly this crisis is telling us that activity can be other things. And perhaps we can build a full package of activity and promotions to position the district in such a way, as I mentioned before, that it can be in the heart of people in your community, not because they are going to your district only, but it's because they can enjoy it from their homes and from wherever they are. And that is certainly one thing that I think everybody talks about in the calls, is how to promote more digital presence. And how to go beyond saying what's happening downtown or what's happening in the district, to be able to say what is it that the people can enjoy wherever they are, because that's the image and identity we want to promote. So keep that opportunity in mind. And it's definitely these areas that are highlighted we're going to see them as important elements in your planning for leading and ensuring that recovery happens. Now let's take a look at organization. In the past, sometimes we work isolated from the other points in the Main Street approach. We need to make sure that every connection is made as possible to highlight the value of having a revitalization program dedicated to the success of the district. If the district is not successful, if the district shows need, as we have been witnessing throughout the last few weeks, when we see doors closing of these businesses that are so important to our districts and our communities, I'm hoping then communities can see the value of having a downtown or a district management organization they can support proactively by providing funding, but also providing time and leadership support. And through that, Main Street organizations are able to learn through this experience that communication of your value, of your mission, of your vision is more important in many ways than what has been in the past. And when we have used our social media or our website just to transfer information, now we need to be mindful that it's about keeping things alive, but also it's about keeping the organization in the minds of people as the instrument of support. I asked a question, and I found a quote that reflects that question. Often that I ask when I visit communities and find that sometimes leaders are questioning the value of their Main Street program. I ask, if you take it out of the picture, what do you have? If that organization ceases to exist, what do you have? What you have is more work for you. What you have is more work for fewer people in your staff, right? What you have is less support for the businesses, no liaisons for the property owners. Who's going to have that activity? Everything that Main Street does is for the community. And we're hoping that you are more proactive in the next few months as you can see the need, not just to go for the funding. Funding helps us exist. But beyond existing, we need to thrive. We need to be that type of organization people know they cannot be without, especially because crises come. And we need, especially to consider, because we need to go through crisis, and we need Main Street in our communities as well. We're hoping that you are inspired to see how much support your Main Street organizations provide and how many leaders that are business owners themselves are still sitting in the boards, also trying to support others. We recognize that and we salute those efforts. We know that it's not easy to go and look beyond your own impact, your own sacrifice, and your own disappointments, but that you are looking at the bigger picture through your Main Street organization. We value Main Street organizations across the country and invite them and want to be part of your efforts to take the next steps to make better and more proactive, more efficient, more successful revitalization programs across the country. There are some few reads I wanted to highlight. I went looking for who else might be talking about leading through crisis, and of course I found out that a lot more people are, many of you. And so there are some inspiring and really good reads. I'm not suggesting I'm the only one that is talking about and this webinar. I'm hoping you're finding it useful, but there might be other opportunities and other articles that you can see that will inspire you, and keep these thoughts in your mind as well. When we look at the opportunities to Plan ahead and plan comprehensively. Think about your leadership needs. Think about how much of an opportunity you have now to use the Main Street approach beyond the structure of committees, to use it by boards, to use it by your programming. And then keep in mind that we're in this together. You're not alone. And that is what this network does for all of us, is the confirmation that we're in this together, but we have been not alone. We have been together. It's just that this brings it to the forefront. Why do I say that? Main Street communities have partners at the state level. If you're in an urban environment, you are likely to have a citywide program. Or a state program. We also have a county program, countywide program. So you have partners within your reach that are also working hard at promoting and providing resources for your benefit. We encourage you to connect with them as often as you can, and more often now than ever before. And we want you to know that the National Main Street Center and Main Street America and Urban Maine, the programs that we have at your service, are there to also bring connections to others. You might be saying, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? There's so many great examples out there of people that have been inspired to do great things. And we want you to tell us what those great things are that you're doing. We want you to tell us what are some of the things that you find are needed. And we are there also as your support, as your national partner. In the last few weeks, we conducted a business survey, and we had about 6,000 or almost 6,000. I didn't see the last number yesterday. Responses. It's an amazing level of response. It's a wonderful response. We're going to take that information and we're going to share it with all of you. And you're going to see the opportunities then to use that information so that you can build a case within your communities. And then for us to build a case at the national level and with our coordinating partners as well. We are also going to conduct a questionnaire or survey of Main Street programs. We want to know how you're doing. We want to know that municipalities and leaders continue to support you. We want to know what are the risks that you see ahead, what are the challenges that you're facing. And hopefully through that information, we are also going to commit to work with you in planning and technical assistance, but also looking for additional resources that can support your efforts through our partnership with the coordinating programs and other national organizations and foundations. In simple terms, this is an opportunity to, number one, confirm that you're not alone. You are among and are part of a strong network of communities that are in similar circumstances and with a strong spirit about ownership and pride on their communities. And that if we look at these spaces, we can then take the next steps and be proactive at making sure that not only do we find ourselves out of this crisis, that we take ourselves out of this crisis as our circumstances allow. And with that, we want to invite you to share any questions or comments that you might have. Again, we want you to know that your community is important to us and that we're definitely committed to working with you and our coordinating partners in your efforts for the next, for the near and the long-term future. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. That was an excellent presentation, and I'll say some of the first comments that are coming in are just gratitude, for the content here, and also just for the pep talk that this was for all of our communities in terms of maintaining our role throughout this. again, for anybody in the audience, if you are able to stay with us, we will take a few questions now. If you have to jump off, those questions will also be part of the recording. So please know that you can always come back and view this. The number one question that I received throughout was about the slides. I did chat them to the audience earlier in the program, but I'm going to send them again via link to the audience. And as Norma had mentioned, we also know that many communities out there are trying to make the case for themselves. I would also encourage you in all of your communities out there to send us examples of the ways in which you are promoting yourself via local advocacy so that we can share those responses across the network. So two things I'm sharing with you now. One, again, is the slides via chat. And then again, I'm going to share the Main Street SurveyMonkey form for community examples and resources. If you want to add an example of local advocacy in there, we would be more than happy to share that with the group, whether or not that's something that's happening just in in your community or throughout your state or local area. Wow, more thanks here. We have a couple of questions that came in throughout the program, Norma, about taking this as a time for prioritizing, facade improvements or some of those design things that we never really get to. Is there something you would say about kind of maintaining that balance, working with property owners at this time on those issues, or how you've seen that in some of the other programs you've talked to?
Thank you, Kelly, and thanks for the questions. I definitely want to encourage people to see the 4-point approach as a complete framework. And although design, when we think of design, we usually say historic preservation, building rehabilitation, beautification, physical improvements on the public space, for example, and placemaking, that those are still important elements. But for property owners and in the opportunity to work with them, we need to build a case that space is crucial, right? And so it is crucial for them because it is income, it is revenue. And so just as we work with businesses to say retention, to say expansion, if possible, succession, or if needed, and then development, sometimes business recruitment, we do it in our communities without actually doing some of the conversations with the property owners. Space is important to your property owner. Space is important for Main Street. Strategic use of space is what we want in our districts. And so this gives us the opportunity to continue the conversation with those property owners. First, with the stronger focus on retention. Can we do something with the retention of businesses? We've seen some cases where lessons learned include that, hey, we throw an idea on social media that the building owner should do this or that as an incentive for the business to survive. What we need to encourage is conversations between property owners and their businesses so they can figure out the best ways, and hopefully if we can facilitate that, that is a wonderful goal for us. But they need to have those conversations. We don't need to throw some things when we know that some of these property owners might be business owners that are also owning property, might have a mortgage on that property. I know we've seen some comments in our listserv or and point. So what we want to encourage is a facilitator, a connector role. And yes, if we do have ideas, present them and share them within that conversation rather than publicly, because just like we can say, hey, that business should be alive and that business should stay, really we don't know all the details on how the business is struggling internally, that it makes it impossible for them to keep their doors open. So just as much we're going to try to work with businesses to keep doors open or to come back, especially because we want them back, we need to work with property owners. Property owners are sometimes absentees only because we don't connect with them. Sometimes they're absentees because they definitely are out of the community, out of the country, or out of the state. But in any case, in no case, they should be absentees from the life of our district and the economic vitality of our district. So I definitely encourage you to consider that conversation about space with your property owners, also with initiatives that deal with the sign. Although in the urgent or managing phase, it might be that you need to consider some points as planting the seed for the sign. It really is important to consider that it's more about making sure the space is ready to be occupied, and rather than to say that the facade or the rehabilitation needs to be taking place immediately when we know people have been impacted with funding. And so we need to be sensitive and mindful, but yes, if we can, there might be people ready to embark in some of those design projects. So don't put them away, just keep them there and see how much you can do with the property owners, with the partners that you have in place, and depending on your priorities, again, the implementation of the approach as a comprehensive 4 points is important. I'm hoping that helped.
I thought that was a great response. One more question we have that came in from Emily. Do you have tips or suggestions on mobilizing committee members during this time, and how can we convey value and good use of their time?
I appreciate that question very much. Yes, that has been in my mind, and definitely an important opportunity for us is to take a look at what's needed, right? What are the priorities? And sometimes we are doing things that support business retention, that support the businesses and the economy, even in other parts of the Main Street approach, right? In other committees. And so take a look at each committee that you have, lay it out, use this slide as far as the 4 points, use it and look and see what you have under each point, who's helping what. So when we look at this, for example, these areas, what committees do you have that are helping those specific areas that are of greater impact or need attention at this time? And so in some cases, I would assume that not all board members can be as active as they, or as sometimes we think they should, and maybe because they're business owners and they need to also take care of their circumstances right now. Well, your board can have an expanded reach by utilizing the leadership of the committees in taking a look at some specific initiatives, whether it's from ideas to evaluating what they're doing, how important it is, to taking a look at what should be within each space that they can recommend to the board, and perhaps to really look at the talents that you have and the talent base that you have. Use the 4-point approach to say, and I've done this in other sessions, and we can definitely make that material available for you. But just by looking at this slide, look at and saying, when we look at working with property owners, or when we look at activity, what committees do we have at this time? What is important that perhaps they don't need to continue to do, but that they can focus on something else? And then individually, look at your volunteers and see if you're able to do strategic human resource management, and that now it's wisely called talent management, right? And so let's take a look at talents that we have within our volunteer base, and then see what we have and what we don't have, and then define those positions. Remember, Main Street does not need just volunteers. Main Street is all about volunteer leaders. And many people now, more than ever before, will want to support you. But perhaps while we are inside and under the circumstances, we can throw ourselves and dedicate our time to take a look also at the talent base that we have, and perhaps some of the opportunities that are needed. And so make that call. But just don't go and just make a volunteer call in general. like a cry that somebody must heard and say, oh, I guess they could use me. No, it's about strategic volunteer leadership recruitment. And it's about saying we need people that know how to do social media. We need people that know how to do digital or e-commerce. We need people that know how to do communication strategically. Sometimes throughout Main Street, we've gone about doing the basics because that's all we know. But our leadership is about influencing people to take action with the talents they have. So I recommend that you use the 4-point approach to outline all the areas that you need support with, and then define job descriptions, perhaps just brief paragraphs that highlight and build those jobs, those leadership opportunities with the volunteers that might come and say, I saw this, what do you mean? And develop it with them as well. But definitely an important question, and one that needs to be of stronger emphasis than has been before in our efforts.
Thank you, Norma. We have time for just a couple of more questions. So I want to kind of consolidate a couple of that have come in and ask one about how we navigate all of the different resources that are coming to different entities in our community at this time, noting that if we work alongside a chamber, they're receiving different resources, our economic development professionals are receiving different resources, and a couple of questions have come in about how we kind of navigate all that. Norma, what would you advise?
Definitely, I think the important role for Main Street is not about doing ourselves the job of revitalization. More than ever, through transformation strategies, we've been promoting that Main Street belongs to everybody. The downtown and your district belongs to everybody. And so what keeps us apart is our distinctive roles. Everybody has their own role, the municipality, the chamber, the Main Street, even the hospitals, right? But there are common themes that can bring us together. What are those? Taking the time, and again, use the Main Street approach to say, what are common themes with some of these organizations? That perhaps would be a common strategy or a tactic or an activity. And so I've seen chambers and Main Streets work together more than I've seen in the past through this crisis. I've seen municipalities take the Main Street and recognize the role that they have in connecting with the businesses, so they don't see the need for duplication or for redundancy. So what we want is to encourage collaborations, first by identifying who are the partners, and if nobody has gone and saying, hey, let's come together, let's do that. It is an important opportunity for Main Street to be a facilitator for collaborations, because after all, the biggest reflection of the impact of this crisis is shown through your downtown districts and through your urban commercial corridors. And so everybody should be proactive at saying, if we get this district to look vital and vibrant again, everything else will be a chain reaction. Everything else in the community will go on the same path. And so, of course, it sounds biased, right? We dedicate our efforts to downtown and to commercial districts, but it is important to say that is the picture of the quality of life, of the economic vitality of your community. So let's pay attention to our district by bringing the collaborations that also have that in mind in their missions. So I invite you to consider putting a list together if you haven't. Definitely Main Street is about public and private sector partnerships. And Main Street can be the ones bringing the private sector, different organizations, corporations, and forming an alliance with the city and the county in taking a look at what resources are needed, who can do what, which one is our role. Therefore, I'll take that. But which areas are we going to look together at supporting our district? So it is about playing together in the sandbox more than ever before.
Okay, thanks, Norma. We're going to take one last question, as we know. Well, we are winding down on our questions. We're also winding down on time. Just one question from Tina. How can we move in the direction of promotion and away from events, especially in the months following quarantine? She notes that her group was already suffering from volunteer fatigue because of too many events prior to this, and they want to be identified. They were starting to be identified just as the event arm of the city.
And that is a tough position to be in if our stronger focus was in promotion. But let me say there's a strength in promotion for your district. The challenge is that we, in a way, went away from or forgot the meaning of promotion in the Main Street approach is about positioning your district. It's not about doing events if it doesn't position the district. And so what we want is to really take a look now, again, strategically, because of not only the crisis, looking at the future. How do we recover, or how do we uncover what the district's potential is? More important than, is the opportunity to say how activity will play a role. And so if anything, the many examples you're seeing out there will show you that there's a balance that we need to create. Number one, in that activity cannot be just visualized by having people in the district only. Now that through this crisis, we learned we cannot just trust to be gathering, but that we need to include a very strong component in promotion about the presence we have online and the activities that we produce so people can have in their homes, or through, again, the online tools, the coloring books, just a very basic in many ways, but it's a tremendous impact when families are indoors, when families are in their homes. And so virtual tours, name it. There's a number of opportunities that now promotion can then combine efforts with design and with other aspects of or points of the Main Street approach. But highlighting, let's start where we need to start first. The role of promotion, the objective of promotion is positioning the district as a center of community activity, business activity, cultural activity. Yes, very important. But how can we do that? Just like you said, especially if we are burning the volunteer base out, and now we're finding ourselves in crisis, it's an opportunity, it's a call to say, how do we go about then building a balance between activity in the district? And again, more than anything, any time before, and through transformation strategies, we're encouraging for Main Street not to be the only one that actually does the events, because downtown belongs to everybody. There might be organizations that benefit from having activities downtown or in their districts. And so let's share. And we then take the role of promoting other organizations' efforts. And it's about expanding our reach, basically bringing down some territories that we had before, some mentalities that kept us thinking, oh, we are the ones that need to be doing this. Even municipalities, if they empower your organizations in your community and support them, there's so much more you're going to get done. And so then done just only by staff. We know that many of the staff in municipalities is also burned out and overwhelmed with all the level of activity they were doing before. It's about building collaborations. It's about prioritizing on what is the position we want for downtown and being true to that priority, and making sure that there's a balance that we can build between standing on site in the district and enjoying an event versus activities that people can go and enjoy online and also in social media and in their homes.
Thank you, Norma. Well, there are a couple of other small questions coming in here, not to minimize anybody's questions, but the most important one that keeps coming in is, how can I get this presentation after this? The presentation will be posted within the next 24 hours at the latest on the Main Street America COVID-19 resources page. There's a direct link to that page from mainstreet.org. You can find this recording there. You can share it. It is open to share with your board committees or other Main Street leaders that you know. I want to thank Norma so much for taking the time to guide us today and to share with us all of her knowledge and wisdom. Norma, I just want to also ensure you that there are tons of thank yous coming into the comment section here. So this is shared from the audience who doesn't have the ability to necessarily say that out loud with you right now, but we thank you so much. Everyone, as we mentioned, we will be posting these resources on our page, and we will be looking forward to announce a couple of more surveys and webinars. So we just ask you to stay tuned with us via social media, via checking in with the Main Street America resource page, and we will keep updating you throughout this pandemic. Norma, any final words you'd like to share?
I would say that, you know, share with us, please. You've seen some pictures that we've received from stories and articles, but we want to know more, not only about your success stories and how you go from through this crisis from day to day. We want to celebrate your success. There's no small success. Anything that motivates you, anything that keeps you positive and moving forward is something that is worth sharing. Please inspire others by sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.